Gavin Lloyden here, Managing Director of QEM Limited. QEM is involved in developing a vanadium and oil shale project in Julia Creek in northwest Queensland. And today I'm very honoured to be joined by Professor Maria Skylos Kazakos, the lady who invented the first vanadium redox flow battery here in Australia at the University of New South Wales in the 80s. Maria has been awarded a Member of the Order of Australia for services to science and technology, particularly in the field of development of this vanadium redox flow battery as an alternative power source. So thanks very much for joining us, Maria. It's very much an honour and a pleasure to meet with you. Maybe you'd like to give us a bit of a description on the VRB systems that you've developed over the years and where you see those going into the future.
Well, we started working on the vanadium battery back in the mid-1980s when we saw the work that NASA had been doing on flow batteries, but they were working on the iron-chromium system. And very quickly we saw that the iron-chromium suffers, and first of all, a flow battery is like a battery, but it's also like a fuel cell. It includes two solutions which contain either the same or two different elements which have a different potential. And as you pass those solutions through a cell stack, which is like the engine, the electrons get transferred from one side to the other. But there's a membrane in between that separates the two solutions. But if you have two different types of elements in the solutions on the positive and negative, the membrane can't keep them separated forever. So eventually they cross-mix. And that was the problem with the iron-chromium battery. This cross-contamination. So we realized that the only way to overcome that was to use the same element in both half cells. So one of my colleagues at the time had been working on processes to extract vanadium and process vanadium. So he said, vanadium's got lots of oxidation states. And we also looked at the periodic table and we said, okay, we'll start testing it. So I had a student who was working with me at the time, and we tested just to check that it was soluble enough. And that's one of the critical things, that it has to be soluble, adequately soluble to give you energy density that you need, and it has to have a suitable potential difference to give you the voltage that you need. So after a few experiments, we found that it was viable to actually use vanadium in both half cells, and that sort of started off a 40-year program, almost, I suppose, 35-year program on the vanadium redox flow battery development, which back in the 1990s, we sort of, we were in fact even doing some field trials and demonstrations. We were working with one of our licensees in Thailand, and we installed a vanadium battery in a solar house in Thailand. We then we issued a license to Mitsubishi Chemicals and Kashima Kita Power Corporation. They were interested in the vanadium battery because at their power station, they were using Orimulsion, which is from Venezuela, and that contains a high level of vanadium. So they were looking at ways of processing and using that vanadium waste, and they thought that would be a perfect match, that they extracted the waste from the soot from their power station and used that to produce electrolyte. And they then, after a few years of working with us, they previously had been working on the iron-chromium battery. They switched across and they put in the first 400 kilowatt-hour vanadium battery at the power station. So, and then we also put in we'll put a vanadium battery into an electric golf cart. So we did quite a few projects in the 1990s, and then the patents were sold to Pinnacle at the time. And after that, when the patents expired, actually, then a lot of other companies started getting into the vanadium battery as well.
Sure. And how do you see VRBs stacking up against lithium, both in an energy density scenario and as well as longevity and safety?
Well, the energy density of the lithium battery is so much greater than any other battery, and that's why they've been used in electric cars. But one of the issues with lithium batteries is that they do suffer from serious safety issues. And recently there have been quite a few fires in some of the large energy storage systems. But whereas flow batteries and vanadium batteries especially are based on water, they don't have any flammable solvents, and so it's so much safer than lithium batteries. And I think that's an important area that people need to be aware of, especially for very large megawatt scale systems.
Yeah, and that seems to be the best place that they're suited for, right? Is grid support structures and off-grid solutions at scale.
Exactly, especially for renewable energy storage, where you need to be able to store 4, 5, 6, 8 hours of energy so that you can then use it. For example, if you use it with solar energy at nighttime, then you can switch across to the energy stored in the batteries. For wind as well, when the wind's not blowing, then you can have at least 6, 7, 8, 10 hours of stored energy, and that's where again flow batteries are very important because the energy is stored in the solutions. You can independently vary the energy storage capacity, the energy to power ratio. You just adjust it by adjusting the volume of solutions, and that makes it. And that means that especially once you start to go above 4 hours of storage, because all you're doing is adding extra solution rather than extra batteries, the cost per kilowatt hour drops off dramatically. And so then, even though lithium batteries might be cheaper per kilowatt hour for small duration applications, up to 2-3 hours. Once you get above 4 hours, then the cost per kilowatt hour is so much cheaper.
And my understanding is that the vanadium batteries don't suffer from the same sort of degradation from the charging and recharging that other battery systems, particularly solid state battery systems, tend to suffer over time. And VRB can store that energy for quite a long period of time as well. Is that correct?
Exactly. Vanadium flow batteries have been shown to undergo hundreds of thousands of cycles. In one of Sumitomo, for example, ran a field trial in about 2005, where over a 3-year period where they were doing the trial, the battery was subjected to over 200,000 cycles without any deterioration in performance. The electrolyte doesn't deteriorate. And so even after 20, 30, 40 years, once you've finished if you finish one project, you can take that electrolyte and then put it into a different project or application. And that also brings up the possibility of, rather than selling the electrolyte as an upfront capital cost to users, a lot of people are thinking about maybe in fact just leasing it because the electrolyte doesn't deteriorate. So there have been a few projects and a few companies that have already started working together to offer leasing arrangements of the electrolyte. And that brings the upfront capital cost even lower than otherwise it would be. And you also transfer the upfront capital cost into an operating cost as well, which is very advantageous. Yeah.
And in that, that life cycle of the battery, there's no replacement issues. It's not like some of the other competing chemistries where they have a limited life and then they've got a disposal issue, which is not the case here with vanadium.
Well, that's right. The electrolyte, because it doesn't deteriorate, you don't need to dispose of it. You just sell it on, or even you can extract the vanadium and then sell it for different applications, because the vanadium always retains its value. So over the years, of course, different parts would deteriorate. You might need to replace a pump here or there, or sometimes individual stacks could be replaced, but that's only sort of small maintenance costs that you would expect with any sort of system, not just batteries. Yeah,
it is an amazing element. It is so versatile in a number of spaces, but obviously this is an extremely important one and a timely one, I think, for Australia and for the world as we seek to decarbonise globally. So where is the vanadium being sourced from currently for the battery systems, and where do you see that going into the future?
Well, obviously that's the main concern that we've had over for the last 10 years, because most of the vanadium that's produced around the world is really targeting the steel industry. The production capacity isn't much greater than just the demand from the steel industry. So as the demand for vanadium flow batteries is increasing, then there have been situations where the demand has been greater than supply, especially when China has been going through very rapid expansion and construction. So, and that's created instability in the price of vanadium, which has been a concern for a lot of people who have been wanting to invest and to use vanadium batteries. So that's why for years now I've been really trying to to help to promote the importance of the vanadium battery and the importance of increasing the capacity of our production capacity for vanadium. Because once we start producing more vanadium, then the supply will become stable and the cost and the price will also stabilize. So that's why I'm very keen to see more production, especially here in Australia, because I mean, here, this is where we invented the battery, and this is where we would like some returns to come back to the community as well, because they supported us for so many years, and we want to see some manufacturing, some production happening here in Australia, and of course to use the vanadium battery, especially as we go more and more into renewable energy. Because as we expand, as we reduce our dependence on fossil fuels, and we start to expand our generation of solar, wind, and so on, that instability is going to cause enormous problems. So for the grid, so we need to have more storage on the grid, and just a few batteries here and there is not adequate. If we're going to be going for large penetration of renewables, we need to have a lot of storage, and flow batteries really are the best solution for that, mega gigawatt scale. And in fact, you're probably aware that in China, they're installing an 800 megawatt hour vanadium battery in Dalian, which is can supply up to 50,000 houses and will store energy from a large wind farm. So that's the sort of scale that vanadium batteries can deliver and achieve.
I know both the private sector and government have got very ambitious plans for energy storage in Australia, and obviously the production of vanadium from mineral sources is becoming more and more important, and we certainly hope that companies like ours at QEM will be able to support that going forward and get into production at the earliest possible time, and support the industry, and as you say, support resilience in the country, and bring back manufacturing. This is an entire industry that can grow up around this sector. It just needs a little bit more of a prompt and a little bit more of a general education into the market, and hopefully we're here to help along those lines as well.
Well, I hope so, because, we've got a lot of vanadium. We can produce vanadium, we can produce a vanadium electrolyte, and then hopefully that will lead us to also start producing batteries as well. And there's a whole industry around even the installation and maintenance and operation of these systems.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And all congratulations to you for developing such a fantastic system. It's come of its time. It may have taken a little while. I'm sure it feels like it's taken some while for yourself. Yeah. But
well, I keep on saying, I keep on telling people that we were 25 years too early when we developed it.
It's often the case. It's often the case. But
at least the time has come now. Yeah,
the time is now. If any positives have come out of COVID, it's probably exposed us to our lack of resilience on a number of fronts, and this being one of them. And it's really sharpened the focus for all Australians, and particularly government, to refocus on actually producing things here in Australia and adding value. And that's what we're here to support as well.
Fantastic. Look forward to it.
Thanks very much for your time, Maria.
My pleasure.
Look forward to our next conversation. Thank you.
I look forward to it as well. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thanks.